Kia ora no tātou, everybody. My name's Brendan Hoare. I'm a founder of OANZ, and it's such a great pleasure to be working with OANZ today to bring you the first part of a series where we're talking with people involved in the organic community globally, of which this whole gene tech is having an impact on. And this is it's a real pleasure tonight to introduce you to Ian James. And I met Ian because I was fortunate enough to have all my formal studies have been in Australia, both my degree and master's. Australia's been very good to me. And we met during a program in Australia called the Organic Development Group, where Australia was looking at developing their domestic regulation. And I was just sort of facilitating a process to take them through that. And it was a great pleasure to meet Ian on the secretariat of that. So we got to be very close. Ian's a farmer, and he's from Gruelling, and he's going to correct my pronunciation of that, which is in Western Australia. It's about 130k northeast of Perth. It's a small rural community of about 20 people. But he's also the director of organic industries in Australia, which is one of the key national bodies. And so he's not just a farmer; he's deeply involved. And it's a chance. So welcome, Ian. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Now, Ian, let's just start by you. I've never seen your property, but I've heard a lot about it. And can you just start by just sharing with us your farming system?
Okay, so first thing to understand about my farm is the scale and the scope. So it's a broadacre property. It's in the wheat belt. We call it the wheat belt. It's not something you put around your waist. It's a large expanse of farming area where we don't have any irrigation, and we subsist on rainfall only. So it's called dry land farming. And it's flat. We don't have any hills really, apart from the odd sort of rise and the odd creek line that meanders through very broad valleys and shallow ridges. Is it a good way to explain it? In my area, it's predominantly light land, which is sandy beach sand. Think of the beach sand is we do have some areas of heavy country which is sticky and like when it gets wet. But so where I am, not a lot of trees. All the trees got pretty much taken out during the 60s when the clearing frenzy happened. Most trees you see around here have been planted since and along the tree lines. There are some remnant vegetation areas, few and far between. But so it's a beautiful landscape. And on this farm, we generally run sheep and wheat. They call it sheep and wheat. But nowadays, it's not just wheat. There's a whole range of different crops with sheep. Sheep are actually leaving the system currently because the government's banned live shipping, and that's meaning that the livestock industry's in quite a bit of turmoil, and that's affecting me too. So I'm reducing my stock numbers. So less sheep these days. Cropping fence to fence is very common. Like a lot of people are taking the fences out. Machinery is huge. It's not unusual to have a 150-meter boom on a boom spray, or 60, 70-foot width seeding machines. Harvesting machines can be up to 60 feet, but generally around 40, 45 feet for a harvesting front. So big equipment, tractors and harvesters are worth over $1 million each around here. That's normal. It's expensive to keep up with the modern, modernization, and so we have a very short winter growing season. That's when we plant our crops. We plant in the autumn and we harvest it ripens in the spring and we harvest soon after that. So very short. Sometimes only 3 months. It's a full growing season, and then the summer is drought. It's just dry and hot. 48 degrees is not unusual here. We don't have long periods of it, thank goodness, but it can be over 45 for weeks on end. So really hot. And so in the summer, nothing much grows. We do get the odd thunderstorm come over, and that'll dump quite a lot of rain, but it's very quick and it runs away. and pretty much within a few days, it's back to the hot again. And yeah, so that's our sort of system. Um, and we just get our crops in as quick as we can once it rains.
Australia's a big country, Ian, and it's got 50 million hectares of certified organic. How many hectares of that do you contribute to? Just to give everybody a bit of scale, how big is your farm?
I've got 1,800 hectares, and it's all organic. Yeah.
And biodynamic, I understand, correct?
Yeah, we're certified. Well, we are certified with BDRI, the Biodynamic Research Institute. We use biodynamic preps, but we don't follow the biodynamic process completely. So I can't certify my produce as biodynamic. Yeah. So it's
So some
certified
of the
organic.
inputs, yeah, so you've modernized it to your system. And apart from wheat, can you just take us through some of your rotation about how you manage your land and just to give us
Yeah.
some context for that, please?
Sure. Well, so, our landscape, like I said, beach sand, not known for being very fertile, really, beach sand. It's slightly acidic. It suits legumes because they like a bit of acid. So the legumes are a really important part of my rotation because they provide huge amounts of nitrogen in the soil, and which obviously we lack here. And so, uh, if you start with the point we start with is the legume rotation, and that we're growing lupins. Lupins are a high value cash crop, and lupins have about 32% protein, which is fantastic for human consumption or livestock. Very popular with chicken farmers, dairy farmers, sheep farmers for their livestock. But I'm finding more and more that our consumers are starting to notice lupins as a great product to introduce into their diets. So that's the lupins. During that phase, generally, if you're a chemical farmer, you'd be trying to use selective herbicides to clean out the grasses out of your lupin crop. So that when the following year comes, you plant a grass crop like a wheat or oats or barley.
Yeah.
Most of the grasses are gone because you've used this chemical and cleaned them out. So obviously, I don't do that. So I don't use lupins to selectively eliminate my grasses. So the following year, after my lupin crop, I would normally graze sheep on it over the summer because it's a fantastic fodder, the stubble. Sheep just survive on it for ages and they do really well. So after the summer, I'm going to plant a grass crop on that land, and it's going to benefit from the nitrogen that the lupins have put in there. Yeah. So the funny thing about lupins is, um, when you've got a fairly low nutrition regime, such as what I have, with low fertility soils and not a lot of soluble phosphates going on because they're not allowed in organics, and no nitrogen going on. I do get some potassium in there, but so the lupins have an advantage because they're providing their own nitrogen from the atmosphere via the bacteria that grows in their roots. So they have an advantage that the grass weeds don't have, and they will outperform and uh, suppress or completely overgrow the grass weeds. So you don't notice it at first until the lupins get up and away. But towards the end of the season, the lupin crop is like a jungle canopy over the field. It's up to a metre high, thick and green,
Oh,
dark green,
wonderful.
and the weeds, the grass weeds, are struggling underneath. They can't get through. They're just not competing well, and then
Yeah.
they collapse. And I'll harvest a fantastic lupin yield from the field. And the following year, hopefully, there's not a lot of weeds,
Plus the
grass weeds.
biomass and the sheep are foraging, and then you are into a grass crop, and then after the
Yeah,
grass crop, you go back into
back into lupins.
yeah.
Really, yeah. I've got to manage it a bit for you don't want diseases developing from too many rotations, but the lupins are really hardy here. We're using a lot of biology on our seed dressings, and the main purpose of that is to help the lupin plant have a balanced biota in the root soil biology that will stop any certain funguses from dominating.
And Ian, just to be clear, when you say a grass crop, you're not meaning ryegrass. I'm just helping Kiwis here to understand what you mean by a grass crop in your
Yeah,
farming system, please.
yeah. By grass crop, I mean wheat, oats, barley, cereal rye,
Yeah.
triticale. Yeah. No,
Great.
we don't like.
Just to be clear for everybody. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, good. Awesome. Now, how many years have you been farming organically?
2016, pretty much. That's when I started. Although we stopped using fertilizers, the chemical fertilizers, about 2012. By
Why?
20, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we were finding it really hard in a conventional farming system to make enough money to pay back how much we'd spent each year.
Oh, yeah.
The cost of chemicals and fertilizers is astronomical. And we're not a huge farm in my area. Like I said, I had 1,800 hectares. Some of my neighbours have got 15,000 hectares. And it's fairly normal to have over 8,000 hectares in this area, which is a big farm, huge. I'm only 1,800, so I'm not the smallest. I'm not a hobby farmer at all, but I didn't have the scale, and you need economy of scale, and
Yeah.
so I was finding it hard, and I thought, going further and further back, and we had a couple of droughts, and it got to the point, and this is a funny story. I said to my wife, it's not funny really, it's quite tragic, but I said to my wife, look, we're going down the gurgler gradually, and I can see the time coming when the bank might sell us up. And I've got to make some big decisions. And I think it's time for us to get out of farming. And we had kids at high school at this stage, boarding school, because we're pretty remote here. And that was going to be a massive life-changing decision for the whole family, because obviously we wouldn't stay on the farm and all sorts of things. And Jodie had been to the Eastern States, and she'd gone to see a carbon farming seminar. And there was this guy from Canada there, and he was going on about getting carbon out of exhaust fumes and running it on your tractor as a machine that could get the carbon out of the exhaust fumes, put them into the soil as a sort of a soil conditioner. And she said, "Well, you're not leaving. You're gonna try this before you go." And my mind sort of rejected that. Really, it was sort of against what I presumed was science and all that sort of thing. But Jodie's pretty persistent, and so we ended up building one of these machines ourselves. We just went on the internet and found methods to do what it was, and put it on the tractor, and we just stopped using fertilizers, and we maintained our yields fairly well, and our costs went down dramatically, and we got ourselves back on our feet. And at this stage, we're still using chemicals, and over the years, I found ways of supplementing that with organic type fertilizers, chicken manures, and other things. Biology, we found biology, and went to a lot of seminars and learned a lot about soil biology and biodiversity, and all these great things that you can use as a farmer to bring fertility into your system without relying on chemical fertilizers. And we eventually we changed our machines and did things differently. We moved away from that system. I actually think it had some merit. We grew some fantastic crops with it, and but we're not using it now, just mainly because it doesn't fit the type of machines I use when we're putting carbon in our soils through other methods. Yeah. But about 4 years later, I started saying to Jodie, well, we've come a long way. We're back on our feet, and everyone said we were going to go broke. Most of the people who said we were going to go broke have since left the district. There's not many of those ones around anymore. We've seen them just disappear and sell up, and we're still going. So much later, we're still here. So that's something we like to, we congratulate ourselves upon. It's just we've stuck it out and we're still here. Yeah. But yeah, we sort of said, well, we started learning about organics, that there's a premium available, and we're always looking for a way to increase our income. It's a risky environment we're in. We need to make everything work in our favor, and along with the other signs about chemicals, that people are getting sick, people and farmers, older farmers are developing health problems at later ages, and they're talking about the reasons for that being linked or related to their use of herbicides through their farming careers, and
Yeah.
so even people who I call kids, my own peers in my own age group, having health problems and like leukemias and glandular fevers and a whole range of different health problems, which are linked or potentially linked or understood to be linked to their chemical use. The lifelong, daily, day in, day out contact with concentrated herbicides, and the difficulty they have in maintaining, the clinical type of hygiene, the laboratory type hygiene that you would need to keep yourselves away from those toxins, which is pretty much impossible, in a working
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
We all like to think we're the great. People say to me, "Oh, if you're worried about chemicals, you should take more. What do you call it? PE. Wear more PE, personal protection. What is it? PE, something like that." Anyway, but I would wear the gloves and the boots, and you'd have a blowout, and some pressure hose would squirt off at the wrong moment, and you'd get covered in it, at 10 o'clock, and you've got a whole day, and you're 20 kilometres from home. You're not going to rush home and have a shower. You've got a big list of jobs ahead of you. You've got to get it
Thank
done.
you.
You
Yeah.
just don't head home. You
That's the
wear it.
reality, right, of the environment which you in and the remoteness which I was trying to convey. And by the way, Jodie is an amazing woman. I've met
Cheers.
Jodie, and I've got to put a plug in because part of it, because she's a Kiwi. That's right. You got to fess up, Ian. There's something in there for us. But and for the audience, one of the things here, people might be going, well, hang on, this is about GE, but it's actually about a farming family, Ian. And before we get onto that topic, it's really important for you to share what you just did, because it helps us understand about your life and the scale and the realities of which you live in. But of course, we will sort of slip away. We can come back to your farming system and explore that. So I really like those, stories of where you are on the brink, really. And so in desperation, you make a move because there's no choice and you got to go. And at 1,800 hectares in New Zealand, that would be a significant cropping area. But as you say, 15,000 wouldn't be unusual where you live, and the sheer scale and operations, and people get locked into systems. And so partly potentially your being smaller has given you an edge to move. But here in New Zealand, there's a gene tech bill proposed. It's running its course through our parliamentary system. And believe it or not, we're told that you Aussies, it's perfect. You've got the system for everybody, and it's the bee's knees. It's a kind of Shelby, right? But that's not what I hear. Hence, reaching out to you. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience of both personal and in the community of working with what's happened in Oz?
Yeah, well, I wish it was, a perfect life, perfect scenario, but the truth is, it's not really. And what I've found is, there's a lot of suppression now because, in the recent years compared to previous years when it was a hot live topic, it's like the debate has been had, and everyone's sort of settled down, and the dust has settled, and everyone's got on with it. But the undercurrent is not as it would appear on the surface.
What does
So,
that look like?
well, for a GM farmer, yeah, I mean they obviously think everything's pretty rosy. They've got everything going their way. They've got the gene technology regulator, who's really a series of a group of industry insiders who have been appointed to the regulatory body, who are basically rubber stamping what it is the industry, even the chemical production, industry, what they feel they require. The Environmental Protection Agency is really just a puppet, a shadow. I rang up the Environmental Protection Agency to report about a 15-kilometre stretch of trees along the side of the road, which had been defoliated because a farmer had been using an aeroplane to apply a new chemical, which had been approved with disastrous effects across the wheat belt. But he'd been using it, and he'd killed, and these are giant salmon gums. I don't know if you know what a salmon gum is. It's a glorious tree, beautiful, thick, thick trunk. It's 40 meters high, whatever, 30 meters high. Anyway, they were dead. They were just dying. And they were very interested in what I was saying. And they said, well, who's done this? Who put this chemical out? And I said, oh, it was a farmer down the side of the road here. And they said, oh, a farmer. Oh, I'm sorry. Farmers are exempt from prosecution under our Environmental Protection Act. And basically put the phone down. That was the end of the call. And so that's the PGA.
How did that make you feel, Ian? How did that make you feel, mate?
I was devastated, and I felt defenseless. I mean, you think that you've got institutions built over years by our predecessors, our forebears, to monitor and take action when catastrophic events happen that might they may be illegal, they may be legal. It doesn't matter whether they are or they're not. That if they should be looked at and analysed and inspected, and systems should be put in place to avoid a repetition of a catastrophic event. So that wasn't happening. So yeah, but so anyway, back to this. So if you're an organic, a conventional farmer, yeah, and really predominantly conventional farmers are ruling the show here. Organic farmers, have in numbers been falling away, especially through COVID. It's become difficult. There's been a lot of rationalisation within agriculture in general. Smaller producers are leaving. The older farmers are leaving, and the younger ones are, becoming more involved with corporate farming. So they're bigger, they're amalgamating, getting corporate finances behind them. So, so it's a hard environment for organic farmers to exist in, and also to move into, and to begin farming in. So, for that reason, there's a lot less organic farmers around. The market is strong, and most of the reasons that we get from the consumers that they don't get, the processors, the reasons they are not buying more organic produce is because it's difficult to source it.
Yeah.
And they want more, but they're not able to get their hands on it at a scale. And if you haven't got scale, you can't set up capacity to process. And so this is just the lie of the land in WA. A lot of farmers are mostly conventional, and not many organic ones, and therefore, yeah.
Can I ask, how many organic farmers were there doing your sort of thing at your scale, say 10 years ago, and how many now?
Okay, well, I haven't got my fingers on the exact numbers and the data.
Roughly, mate.
I can only give you anecdotal stuff. I'll give you anecdotal answers. So I'd say we've got half as many of the real rigid farmers, and of the smaller ones, which are doing the markets and that sort of thing, just the local markets, probably a lot less. Probably only a quarter of those ones are still going. So there is growth at different sectors of the organic farming. So there is some growth, but at the top end, where you've got large broad acre scale, there's a lot less. Yeah.
So one of the things we're told here is a promise. There's a couple of things on this. That's really good what you just shared there. Thank you. And I acknowledge that it's quite personal, like what you feel. And I think one of the things that there's that sensitivity to the loss of those. I do know those gums you were talking of. I mean, magnificent. And to be gone in an instant and no repercussion because there's some exemption. But we keep getting told that there's this coexistence that can happen. It's magic. You can just happen right alongside your neighbour who's doing all of that stuff. Do you want to, what's your experience on the ground?
Yeah, sure. Well, the coexistence things comes back to the point I was making about the fact that most of the farmers are conventional. So that's what you're going to hear. That's the message that's going to get out. So they'll tell you they're coexisting fine. But if you talk to an organic farmer and ask about how he's finding coexistence, well, I mean, in my case, I'm still existing just. I have been within a hair's breadth of being ruined, and it just astounds me the fact that I'm still here and still viable as a farmer after what we've been through as a result of the operations of our GM farming neighbours. They've pretty much destroyed my main cash crop, which was organic oats, and I had a fantastic market for organic oats. We would put the whole farm into oats as much as we could, and really the buyer would take everything I could grow, and that was fantastic. This is back in 2018 or so, 2019, 2018. And we've been doing it for years, 4 or 5 years, and building up every year, more, growing more and more. It was great. It was our bread and butter. And during that time, the farmers around me were adopting GM farming practices, and they were delighted by the fact that they could spray their crop with Roundup and kill every living thing in it apart from the actual crop. And
Which was what? What was the crop?
canola.
Canola. Thank you.
Yeah,
Just for
yeah,
clarification. Yeah.
yeah. So and so that when the changes that happened when the GM canola, because we had canola growing here before, and it wasn't a big deal, it wasn't a problem for us. And in fact, I used to grow it myself. But when the GM canola was being planted, it changed the way they managed their chemical applications. Of course it would. So they're still using Roundup before planting their crop. So that's the same as a normal farmer would. But when the canola grows, at a certain stage, it's fairly small, when they've still got access to the soil below the canopy.
Yep.
They're spraying it with a fairly heavy dose of Roundup. And then 4 weeks later, when the plant's a little bit bigger, but what they say, the canopy hasn't closed, they'll spray it again. But this time they'll need to put a lot more water on, and even more chemical, because they're trying to get down further into the canopy. And they're really, it's always bad practice to spray the same chemical on a crop twice in one growing season, because you're selecting for resistance. It's a pretty basic, and we all understand that. All the farmers understand that, but that became common practice. That is a standard way of doing this, and you basically have to sign up for it. You have to sign contracts to say you're going to farm like this when you buy the seed.
So they lock into a system. There's no
Yeah.
movement like you get. They're locked into a kind of factory system. Yeah, keep going.
Otherwise, you don't get the seeds.
Right.
And and so and it's a big crop, canola. It's very leafy, and it's a big canopy, a lot of biomass. So later on in the year, they're spraying again with Roundup prior to harvest.
Time?
Yeah, and this time it's even more water. Well, what I'm saying about water means volume. It's the amount of liquid that's been, it's a mix of water and chemical and additives to make it more effective. So the rate of water per hectare is increased, because you've got to get it into the canopy, and the canopy is a 3D thing now. It's not a flat surface. It's a meter high, and it's got a lot of contact surface along through that canopy, and they've got to force the droplets down into that canopy. So they've got on their boom, and I mentioned earlier 150 meters is pretty much standard. 150 meters, 36, sorry, 150 feet. I'm getting that wrong.
150 feet, 36 meters. It's still substantial. It's a swimming pool width.
It's huge. It's huge. And they've got a big manifold on the boom, which has air forced into it under pressure, so they blast down a blast of air into the canopy to take the chemical down. And what's actually happening, and they say, oh, this stops the drift, because what we're doing, we're using this method, and it's going to stop drift because all the chemical gets into the canopy and stays there. But what we're finding is that these machines are creating much more drift because they're atomizing and volatilizing the chemical into tiny droplets under pressure. And at certain times of the day, when you've got heat inversions
Yeah.
happening, which, yeah, the chemical doesn't even get down
You got a
into
bit of
there.
heat in Western Australia, you just mentioned that.
Yeah, we do. And so in the mornings when you get these layers of heat and cool, they don't mix. They sit on top of each other in a very still morning, and they move across
Sure.
like you know like a skater on ice. They slip along and they go kilometers or miles, a huge distance, and gravity takes them down to the lower areas. And you know, so what we found when we harvested our organic oat crop, everything was honky dory. We put the grain in the stack, and then we put it in the trucks, and we sent it down to the processor. And about 3 weeks later, we get a call back, and he's saying, "We've got a problem. There's been a detection of glyphosate in your grain," and we're like, "Well, what's happened here? We haven't used any glyphosate for years, so how's that going to happen?" And so they did further testing, and they had results coming in from different loads where they were detecting uh, glyphosate in the grain, and it basically the limit is detection. So because as
Yep.
the methods get more sensitive for the for detection, um, yeah, the limit is detection. So if they can detect it, it's not allowed. I mean, now that's a fair enough thing to say. If you're an organic farmer, you shouldn't have any detection, but
No, one would no.
you shouldn't have
And
it.
by the way, can you just explain your markets are export, right? You're not selling to mum and dad down the road a bag of oats to make some porridge with.
No, well, the oats weren't. They were going to Taiwan, and there's like markets in Japan, Taiwan, Korea, and I guess even China. But the big one for us in WA here was Taiwan, and it was
Yeah.
a great market. They were taking everything, and they've got a very strict um, you know, limit on glyphosate, and so they should have. I've got no problem with
But
that.
hang on, Ian. There's this. We're told that we're told that GE crops use less glyphosate.
Well, that's ridiculous. Whoever says that doesn't or has never seen GM farming in Western Australia. That is laughable for me.
And it's
Totally.
changed the system of farming. So the spray system is, and I don't want, the audience here to sort of, because we'll have a mix of this audience. There'll be farmers and there'll be consumers. That the drastic change in the farming system in Western Australia. Can you tell me what's the mood of your neighbours? It's obviously upsetting and it's changed your farming system, but what's happening in your neighbourhood and the sort of health and wellness of your neighbours?
Yeah. Well, my neighbours, I guess that Mr. and Mrs. Average, there's nothing special about them. They're lovely people, and they're out here busting their asses to make an income for their families, and mostly family farmers. So I've got nothing against my neighbours, but they're sensitive to you know uh, messages.
Criticism. Yeah.
Yeah, messages that they don't perceive well about maybe themselves. Sensitive about things that they hear about that might reflect on themselves. And so what was happening to me needed to be discussed and investigated and analyzed and understood. And that meant there was a lot of talking that had to happen. And a lot of the talking was reflecting on the activities of my neighbours and what they were doing, because I didn't use Roundup on my farm and someone's using it. And, it's probably someone on my boundary because they're the closest to me. So the discussion had to be had. And, I had to write, for purposes of my certification, maintaining that and keeping it, I was required to write letters to my neighbours to, inform them of situation and, get an understanding and maybe ask them uh, to understand my problems and think about ways that we might uh, avoid a repetition of that same thing happening. So, it's all very gentle, sensitive language that we need to use so that we don't set people up against us. But
don't tell me it involved lawyers. You could do this as a neighbour, or did you have to involve
yeah,
lawyers?
no, I didn't involve lawyers, but I'm capable of writing a letter as well as a lawyer can write a letter, and I wanted to be, look, I have some regrets about the way I did this, and after listening to my neighbours and having some sometimes heated discussions with them, because they were hurt and fearful and yeah,
Yeah,
concerned and
well,
all those things. But I would like to go a little, just finish off with
please,
the
yeah, please.
description, because so I had to communicate with them. I needed to be very clear. I didn't want to be vague. I wanted to be precise in my language.
Mm,
Uh, it made them fearful that I was setting up myself up to go to court, to take them to court. And I didn't realize that at the time. Um,
fine.
but I've had feedback from my neighbours. I'm not going to be specific, and they've told me that it made them have sleepless nights and and have thoughts of leaving farming and not wanting to stay in the district, and and darker thoughts too that was expressed to me, and and that and they said, why didn't you just come up and knock on the door and have a chat? And there was a good reason why I didn't do that, and that was I had already had interactions with my neighbours that made me feel very much not uh, a a person who was very welcome on in their doorstep, and it wasn't hard for me to get that perception from them, and I avoided them, and it was rough, and it is rough out here,
Yeah.
and I don't mind that. I'm okay. I can handle a bit of rough, but I'm not gonna go tiptoeing up to their door um, for a cup of tea. It's I'm busy too, and it's just let's get an email out. And there's a lot of neighbours, not just one. I don't have time to go to 15 neighbours. I need to get the letter out, so a generic letter goes out.
Yeah, no, this is an important point because it's partly about the traceability, which our bill doesn't have, Ian. And, you know, I think what you've raised here is such a human thing. People forget that urban and rural communities behave slightly differently, and you've got to live together, right?
Mm,
Because you cohabit and you share resources.
mm,
But katabatic air, and technology has no boundaries. It has no cadastral boundaries. And so we're being told categorically, I'd like your opinion on this, that if we have, and I would imagine what it sounds like, that you lost commercially out of this,
oh,
and
sure.
that if there's a problem, we're going to have to do the tracing, we being the organic community, and we're going to have to take it to court.
Oh, yeah.
So polluter doesn't,
No.
and hang on, you talked before about, feeling defenseless and the idea of your forebears working hard to put Ian and his family in this scene, and here you are. How does that feel, man? What's your opinion on that stuff?
Oh, the deck is stacked against us. Seriously. And like I said, it's because everyone is conventional and we're the organics, we're a few, and it's set up for the many, not for the few. And that's fine. But there's nothing which is even similar to coexistence in that sentence. It's set up for the many and the newcomers. And I mean, yeah, we're not really newcomers. 45 years ago, everyone was organic. But we are now considered to be the newcomers. So
Ah,
it's business, it's a business as usual for the majority. Mm.
yeah. Now, Ian, we've been nearly going an hour. What's your vision of the future?
Mm. Oh, I've got a big vision.
You tell us
Yeah.
about them.
Well, so, over the last 2.5 years, um, you know, I'm, 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 I am a forward-looking farmer. I look to the future. And it's pretty clear that the future of the globe is going to be very focused on mitigating the effects of climate change. And the huge economies are getting geared up to take steps that are going to reverse the effects of industrialization on our climate. I'm not going to get too scientific, but that's easy to see. So I've gone and got myself registered as a carbon project, and which I just thought it seemed smart, and why not? I like the idea too. So, but after having done that, I came in touch with some big funds coming out of Europe and China and other continents where there's a lot of what do you call it? Private wealth. What's the word? Private equity, which is pulled together to generate more money. Okay, and these organisations have an image that they like to craft so that they can attract equity to themselves from the public, and they've got to be perceived as a good citizen. And a good citizen in this day and age is one that's concerned about climate changes, it's doing something about it. So they're allocating portions of their funds to activities that are going to mitigate climate change. And the answer at the moment, the one that everyone's talking about and wanting to do, is carbon sequestration. And it turns out that agricultural land is one of the most viable carbon sinks available to us, that we manage, that we closely manage, and it has the capacity to be managed differently, easily. And so the funds wanting to get themselves involved in agriculture, and they're looking for farming systems that are synergous with what it is they want their public, their members, to perceive, and that is that they're a good citizen and they're looking after their land, and that they have checks, audits, and certifications to verify that what they say they're doing is what they are doing. And organics fits perfectly into that. I mean, we've got already in place a great system for verification of practices. So I'm working with these funds to
Cool.
encourage them to implement this type of work, what I'm doing on a large scale. Yeah.
Way to
That's
go,
pretty much.
Ian. Yeah, so yeah, a lot of organic farmers are very progressive and forward thinking like that. And it's a shame I have been to Western Aussie. I've never been to your property, but it sounds very enticing now to want to do that. Ian, is there any other final words you'd like to just sort of wrap on? There's something you wanted to say that you haven't, or reflection of what clarification?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to finish off by saying, um, I guess I've been through a process of having a coexistence attempted and coexistence failing, and then going through the process of managing the relationships of myself and my neighbours through that breakdown of coexistence, and getting close to the other side of it, till you get to the point where you think, well, that's been done now. It's like a revolution from the start to the finish, and I feel like I'm at the finish of that now. I know I'm not quite at the finish, but I feel like I've been through something, and
Yeah.
and so just to finish off on what that experience was, um, I've been left feeling as an outcast. It's not quite the right word, but ostracized is not quite the right comment. There's lovely people in my communities and who don't even take any notice of all this stuff. But amongst my peers, that peer group pressure thing that we all talked about when I was at high school, I feel it definitely, really feel it. I feel like, all my great mates, my footy team mates, who are all farmers don't look at me in the same light. And I notice it when I go to town, when I go to the shops. I've been sworn at in the supermarket. I've been called names I can't mention, in public loudly. Um, so and so that's not coexistence. It's not. It can't be.
No.
It's nothing like it. And it's on a different level. That's a social thing, But so it's all settling down now. I've had to metamorph into something that I don't would not have done. I've had to change the way I present myself and how I feel about myself, so that I can, get by. So I'm still organic. Um, I just don't. I I know that the chemicals are still coming over the fence just as much as they ever did.
Yeah.
Um, I I I I fear every day that there's going to be a detection in my produce, and that after the grain has been sent, delivered, and ready to go, there's going to be a call to say we're not going to pay you for that. And
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, that's how it is for me.
So, Ian, one question I've got of you to help us here in New Zealand. So, thank you for sharing all of that. It's very personal, but we need to hear that, and it's very strong of you to sort of witness that and share that with us. What advice would you give us here? I mean, we're in a real arm wrestle here, man. And what advice would you give us if you could, if you could get in front of our minister? Um, what would you say in 2 minutes?
I'd say, look, it looks like a little cherry that you want to eat, this GMO thing, but you don't really need it. You're doing fine. You're doing really fine. And you've got something quite unique in the world. You really have something special, and you've done it through for a long time. Um, don't change something that's already working. You don't have to have GM, you know, and encourage your farmers to take up organics and live healthily, to have their kids and their families healthy on those farms, and have the consumers not ingesting these chemicals in their foods. But that's not my primary thing. It's just you don't need it. You'll be fine without it. You don't have to have it.
Cool. Thank you, Ian. That was awesome. And always great to work with you and share your insights and thoughts, man. Thanks so much. And
You're welcome.
yeah, and thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And yeah, you'll hear more of this. Thank you.